Good morning, stay-at-home mums and other hard-working people. I wanted to record this video with a beautiful view behind me so that you can get a taste of where I live in the beautiful Galilee in northern Israel. Unfortunately, when I put the camera that way, you just see darkness. So you're going to have to look at my mug instead. I wanted to talk to you this morning about a tribute that I'd like to give to other YouTubers. Now, this might seem like a con or a weird ploy just to get more traffic, and it might work. But really, I just wanted to say how grateful I am. And the reason is the following. I have always been very anti-social media, and I don't like it. And the reason I never liked it was because I always felt that it was fake, it wasn't real, and you don't get to see people as they really are. And it made me very uncomfortable. And I was actually pretty much one of the first of all of my friends just to leave Facebook. I just got off Facebook. It made me uncomfortable. This was over 10 years ago, actually, and I never looked back. And since then, I don't really follow anyone on Instagram, and the only time I look at Facebook is when one of my friends has a baby or something, and my husband alerts me to it. But basically, I don't really use social media very much. However, this all changed. Up until about 2 years ago, the only YouTube videos I looked at, or vlogger, was Adriene Mishler, who does amazing yoga videos. And when I started looking at her videos, she had maybe a few thousand followers, and now she has over 5 million. So in the last 8 years, I've really watched her bloom, and I found her very helpful. Her yoga videos, right from the beginning, have been very inspiring, very easy, and quite basic to follow. And I've really enjoyed looking at them. They've really helped me. She has videos for all lengths, for all kinds of things, for yoga for everything you can imagine. Yoga for when you've had a difficult day, yoga for when you're feeling depressed, yoga for people who are very good at yoga, yoga for people who are beginners, yoga for people who don't have much time. You name it, she has it. And after I had a really difficult miscarriage a few years ago, it wasn't a traumatic one, it wasn't a long way far into a pregnancy, but it left me feeling very unwell afterwards with sorts of horrible infections, and I didn't exactly know what I needed to do to get over it, and I had a feeling that intense exercise was not the way to go. So this is when I started doing more yoga at home and using videos, and she was by far the best. But other than her, I didn't look at any YouTube bloggers or any YouTube videos whatsoever. And then this all changed about 2 years ago. What changed? I myself went through a difficult trauma. I had a newly diagnosed diabetic 4-year-old, and I was expecting a baby. I was right at the end of a 5th pregnancy in the same month, and it was a lot to process. First of all, processing that you have a disabled child it's just earth-shattering. Nothing prepares you for that, to be honest. And second of all, diabetes is an illness that requires a lot of calculations. You have to be very on the ball, very awake, and you have to do maths, which I'm not terribly good at. And at the end of a pregnancy, your brain is kind of spacey. You're focused on what's going on inside you. And I found that really difficult. I found it, I couldn't do the calculations. I could think about what he was eating, and I could ask him how he felt, and I could monitor him. But just that kind of clear-headed level thinking, I just didn't have it. So I relied heavily on my husband in the early weeks. And when he was first diagnosed, he spent a few days in hospital. My husband spent the first 2 nights with him, and after that, I decided that he had the easier ride because I was at home with 3 boys, and I decided that was actually more work, being at home with 3 boys, heavily pregnant. So we switched, and I spent a night in the hospital with him. And but that whole period was very taxing mentally and emotionally, and extremely isolating, because however, even if you do have family around you, which I don't, but even if you do have close family and friends, unless someone's actually been through something similar, they really don't know what to say to you. And I was very upset. I felt like I lost a lot of friends, and people weren't very supportive, and I was quite surprised at the way certain people who I thought I was close with, how they acted. And it's only now, with a bit of a more clear head, more than 2 years on, I realised that half those people probably had no idea what type 1 diabetes actually entails, or how it affects the kid, or how it affects the family. They probably just didn't get it. And the other half of the people who I thought were just not behaving like they should be, they probably did know, or knew to some extent, but just perhaps didn't know how to be supportive, or how to be helpful, or just what to say when they bumped into me in the street. So it ended up with me feeling very isolated, and if you couple that with being a new mum, it was, tenfold, multiplied tenfold, shall we say. So it was a very difficult time. And on top of that, I really couldn't leave the house very much. I had so much going on with a new baby and a 1-year-old and a diabetic 4-year-old who, even when he went to nursery, he had a full-time, carer. Even when he was in nursery, I had to make him at the beginning special food or label things, how many grams, how much insulin to give him. I was in constant contact with her. I often had to rush up to the nursery at a moment's notice because something had gone wrong or they needed something. She was learning, I was learning. When I say she, I meant his carer. So there was a lot going on. And most times, the only time I left the house was to walk in that few minutes to nursery with the 1-year-old and in one hand and the new baby in a sling. And I also have 2 other older children to care for who were 8 and 7 at the time. And it was just very, very difficult. Leaving the house was a huge big deal. Literally, apart from that walk to nursery, maybe a once-a-week shop, and a few months after the baby was born, I managed to get back to my belly dancing classes once a week, which was fantastic. A huge difficulty, very, very difficult to get to it, but my husband was insistent that I had that 2 hours to myself. But pretty much, other than that, never left the house. Just going anywhere, going to a cafe, going to an event was very difficult. Planning what everybody would need, the usual new baby stuff, plus toddler stuff, plus all the stuff that a diabetic needs to take with them, what to eat if their sugar goes low, what they eat if their sugar's too high, medications, all this kind of thing. It was a huge mission to just get out the front door. And the upshot was, I just didn't leave very much. And when you see where I live, a remote hilltop in the Galilee, I obviously didn't see that many people. So I was heavily reliant on people coming round, and as I explained earlier, not everybody got it or knew how to behave. So it was extraordinarily isolating situation. I was very lucky, actually. I had a bit of help from social services. They saw that I literally was frying food in one hand, pottying a child in another hand, and administering insulin with a third hand that I didn't have. And they actually sent me a very sweet helper for a few hours a week. But other than that, I didn't really have any help. And the feeling of isolation was very intense. So that was when I discovered YouTube bloggers. A friend of mine introduced me to this girl who did vlogs on curly hair, which I never really had much time to deal with, but I found that suddenly in my pregnancy, I suddenly had this interest in doing my hair, which I've never had in about 39 years, so it was a bit strange. Afterwards, when she was born and I discovered she was a girl, I thought, maybe that was that thing that people tell you, that when you're pregnant you start to emulate how your child's going to be. And maybe because she's my first girl after 4 boys, maybe that was the sudden interest in doing my hair. I don't know. But all of a sudden I realised that all these girls with curly hair who actually do hairdos. Up until then I'd only ever seen people doing hairdos for straight hair, and it was all very unfair. So it was a whole new world. So that was the first one. And then she told me about another vlogger called ClutterBug. Don't know if you know her. She's one of the, hello guys. She's a very intense American. Actually, I think she might be Canadian. She's very lovely, and she's given me a lot of help, a lot of ideas about how to run my house tidily, efficiently, how to clean it, how to keep things in shape. I don't agree with everything she says. She's on a slightly different wavelength to me with a lot of things, but in terms of household organisation, keeping things tidy, adopting good habits, I found her really helpful because I was literally spending 98% of my time in a home. There was an awful lot to manage. I mean, all of a sudden I had all these new things besides new baby things. I had my son's medication. They took up lots of space. They needed to be organised. Suddenly I had 2 kids in school, 1 kid in nursery, another kid home, and all the new babies. There was just a lot of stuff floating around my house that needed to be organised. So I found her really, really helpful, really funny, and after everything I'd felt about bloggers not being real, the thing that made her real for me was at the end of her videos where she tells you how to organise your art cupboard or how to tidy up your pantry or how to keep something clean. She does often a little kind of, I guess you could kind of call it, it's a bit like an outtake video, but she just tells you some story about something ridiculous that happened in her life that week, and she just seems a lot more real. She's been very honest about her efforts to lose weight, and I feel very sympathetic to her. I'm lucky I'm naturally slim, and I just can't imagine what it must be like to have to deal with that. So it was interesting listening to another person's problems, and she just felt so much more real to me because of that. So she was another great one, ClutterBug. I think her real name's Cassie. And the other one that was very useful was a one called Pick Up Lines. This is a girl who she's a dietitian, she does a vegan blog. I don't have an awful lot in common with her, but she has some ideas for good habits, and she also has some really simple vegan recipes. I'm not vegan, I'm kind of plant-based. I just try to eat as much stuff that comes from plants as possible and as little junk food and animal stuff as possible, just in the interest of being kind to the planet and to me. So I found her recipes doable, simple, healthy, things I actually want to eat, things that my kids like to eat, and she gives lots of useful advice about making things in the kitchen. So she was very helpful. Her name is Sadia, and her blog is called Pick Up Lines. She has vlogs and loads of blogs about recipes. She was very helpful. But the other one I found fantastic, and I've only discovered her fairly recently, was Therese. I think that's how was it Therese? I'm not sure how you pronounce her name. And she was pretty much the first vlogger I ever saw. She's a mum of 3 little kids. She looks amazing, so I was quite intimidated with how beautiful and clean and put together she looked, until I discovered she's half my age. I feel a lot better about her. But she's, for some reason, very wise for her young years. I have no idea how. Possibly because she was homeschooled. That's my theory. But she's very wise. And she's the first vlogger I've met, she's 3 under 3 at the moment, who doesn't seem ashamed to be proud and interested in her kids. So she's in touch with the real world. She's not a kind of spacey attachment parenting mum who has kind of one breast hanging out and toast stuck to her head, I guess like me. She doesn't give this kind of eco mum kind of earthy thing. She seems normal. She's an ex-makeup guru. However, she's unashamedly interested and obsessed with her kids and her household. And I really respect her for that. She's also a religious Christian. I'm sort of ex-religious Jew, so I kind of relate to her lifestyle, her interest in the Bible and what she does on a Sunday, and it kind of makes sense to me. But aside from all of that, she just seems to have her head screwed on, and she's given me an awful lot of information about things like sustainability, how to have a wardrobe that is sustainable and it doesn't not bad for the environment, not ethical, that kind of thing. Minimalism, totally a new concept for me. I grew up in a very cluttered house, so this whole minimalism revival is absolutely fascinating to me. She seems to be into healthy food. I wouldn't say she's exactly on my wavelength, but kind of there. And she gives really good advice about looking after kids, stuff that it's taken me 20 years to figure out. Or in other ways, I mentioned earlier, she's unashamedly interested in her kids. This probably sounds very crazy to a lot of people, but where I live, on this remote hilltop, it's deeply, deeply uncool to be very interested in your kids. This is something that I've learned from after living here. Children are something that are educated, entertained, driven to forms of entertainment, chugim, that means activities, piano lessons, activities, art lessons, pottery lessons, dance and gym, all that kind of, taken and shepherded to activities. They're entertained, as I said, they're educated, and they are something that have to be distracted or kept busy, kept out of the way, fed, watered. But to be unashamedly interested in your kids and spending time with them is almost like a shame, because it means you don't have anything else in your life. It means that you perhaps don't have a career, you perhaps don't volunteer. A prime example of this is I've noticed that when a woman gives birth in this community, the first thing she does is join 3 committees, because it's not okay to just be at home with a little baby. You have to be doing something else as well. So they'll join an education committee or some other committee on the settlement. And to me, I find this very patronising, very offensive actually, because I've been at home with my children now for almost 11 years. I've done small lines of work. I had a small Chinese takeaway business, which was a bit revolutionary here because there's not a lot of Asian food around. I've taught a little bit of English here and there to different ages. I've done some translations for people on the computer, a little bit here and there. I wrote a book while my children were asleep. It's not a particularly good book, but it is a book. But in terms of making money and having a career and doing things outside of the home, I haven't done very much. And we've been solely reliant on my husband's income for the last almost 11 years. So for me, living in this way, I feel like I'm pretty much the only one living like this. So for me to meet someone like Sarah Therese, now she's obviously a world famous vlogger and now she has a career, but before that point, she was, I guess, your average stay-at-home mum. And she's unashamedly admitting to things like sitting down and reading stories to her children and prioritising them and not being on her phone all the time. and thinking of activities for them, but yet she seems balanced. She doesn't feel like she has to entertain them all the time. She kind of gets the concept of being with your children a lot, but not feeling like you have to entertain them a lot. I feel that is a very distinctive difference between her and how other people parent, and I find that really gels with how I feel. So the reason I wanted to make this video was just to thank all these people, because they got me through a very, very, very difficult period in my life, and they've inspired me and they've helped me with lots of different angles of my life. And I just wanted to give a big shout out and thank you to all these women, and if they ever see this video, I hope it makes them feel good, or as good as they made me feel. Thank you.